Oh, hello. My name is Mara, and welcome to Books Like Whoa. Okay guys, this is a different setup than you have seen in many moons, and that is because I felt good enough today. I was like, okay, maybe I'm gonna try sitting on the floor. Getting crazy here. I don't think I've done this since February. For those of you who have been here for a while, you know that I had emergency surgery back in March. I'm still healing from it. It's been a great time. So anyway, I'm excited to be back in this setup that some of you may not have seen since there's been a lot of new people here in the last few months, but welcome. It is time to do my mid-month check-in. This month has been a good reading month, but not as kind of like frenetic in pace as July was, which is okay. I'm kind of also having a little bit of book hangover from a really good book I read last weekend, which we'll talk briefly about. So I think that hasn't had my kind of speed going as quickly as it was in July, but that's fine. I'm still making a lot of progress. My kind of strategy for this month has been to work on a lot of my arcs that I have, because I'm thinking if I can get through most of my arcs this month, which I think I can for the rest of the year, then I'm gonna have more space to continue what I've been doing, which is doing arcs plus mood reading. And that has been a really good combination for me in terms of just like overall enjoyment of my reading and my life. So with that being said, let's talk about what I've read, what I'm currently reading, and what I might read next. Okay, in terms of what I have already read, well, I've got some physical books here, but let me see if I can remember some of the ebooks. So I read The Alien Assassin's Convenient Wife by Ruby Dixon, which was just a delight. Thank God for Ruby Dixon. She is just chef kiss. I appreciate her particular blend of smart, campy sci-fi. It's always like an old reliable for just like a nice palate cleanse. I've also been doing kind of a binge read of a series from Michele Mills, which is also campy sci-fi romance. And the earlier books in the series are not as good. It's definitely like, you can see her growing in her writing over time. I think the first one came out in like maybe 2015 or 16, and the more recent ones are from like last year and this year. And the more recent ones actually like got pretty good. They're not quite as good as Ruby Dixon, but like they have some like real like plot and better pacing and more ingenuity. There was one called, I think it was ZHORYA'N's Game, which was a take on The Most Dangerous Game, but like a campy sci-fi romance. I actually thought it was really cool. So I've been enjoying, that's been sort of my like those like campy sci-fi romance has been like my go-to this summer for palate cleansing. And I'm enjoying it. It's a fun, I think I've been reading a lot of sci-fi this year with Operation Sci-Fi, and it's like my lighter, funner end of things. It honestly kind of reminds me, it's the same sort of pleasure I got from a book like Thrawn, where it's not like the best thing I've ever read, but it's just like fun and like, you know, let's have fun in space. Why not? So I got through that. I did read Well Played by Jen DeLuca, which I think I'll save to talk a little bit more about at the end of the month, because I'm gonna tell you I was a little disappointed in it. I did give it 3.5 stars. It's not a bad book. It's still really well written, and I think the character work is really good, but I did think it was noticeably not as good as Well Met last year. And I think that some of the romance piece, like the part of the book that worked the least for me was the romance, even though I really liked the writing, the themes, and the characters. But like, if you're coming to a book for a romance, that's the main thing you want. So I will continue reading in the series, and I want to be clear. I don't think that this book was like bad. I just think it's not as good as Well Met. So just like, if you're gonna keep reading, maybe temper your expectations. I am so excited for Mitch and April's book. This second installment made me even more excited for that. So, you know, sometimes you have a little bit of a sophomore slump, which I think maybe is what happened here. So I did get to that one. And then let's see, what else did I have non-physically? Oh, I read A Princess for Christmas by Jenny Holiday, which was kind of a surprise. Maybe I'll talk more about it as a surprise at the end of the month, but I wanted to read it because I've actually been hearing good things about Jenny Holiday as sort of a fun contemporary romance author that kind of seems to verge like somewhere between contemporary romance and maybe like women's fiction was sort of the vibe I got. And I actually really thought that this was very fun and sweet, even though it does have like some dirty talking. it takes a pretty closed bedroom approach to the sexy times. The setup is this princess of a made-up European country is in New York for this big thing with the UN speech she's gonna give, and her driver doesn't show up, so she ends up getting into a cab because it's Romancelandia. That cab is driven by a heart of gold guy trying to raise his little sister after his parents have passed, and you know, they fall in love. And it reads like a Hallmark movie. That is what this book reads like, but also it has the F-bomb in it, so like a little bit spicier. Okay, I'm not sure if this is the same shot. Sorry, my memory card got full. And I don't know if this is gonna work either. We'll find out. Sorry guys, new camera. I'm still figuring out how to record on an actual camera versus my iPhone. Turns out this is more work. Okay, Princess for Christmas, yeah. So basically just this was surprising to me because it did end up giving me sort of the vibes of a Hallmark movie, but in a book and with the F-bomb. And I thought it was cute. It was charming, and if that's the kind of feeling you want, I think this book will deliver. So I read that. And then audiobook-wise, the one that I have finished was Untamed by Glennon Doyle, which has been a big sort of like self-help memoir kind of thing. And I thought it was good. I think I gave it 3 stars or 3.5 stars, something like that. I thought it was good and well executed. I don't know that there was a lot of like new things in that book. It was a cool story, and I thought she told her own story well. I guess I just didn't personally super connect with it. I don't know. But, you know, wouldn't steer anyone away from it. Just wasn't necessarily my personal favorite, but a fun kind of like memoir / self-help, finding your inner untamed cheetah kind of thing. So those were the ones I've read that I don't have in physical form. Oh, well, except for the thing that gave me a book hangover, which was Black Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse. I binged that last weekend. Spoiler, it is my favorite book of the year so far. It's so good. I really, really loved it. It is exactly how I personally like epic fantasy. So like it just completely worked for me. It's not going to completely work for everyone, I don't think, but it has one of the like most intense opening scenes I have ever read, and it did not let up from there. It was just so propulsive. So I just like, I was on the edge of my seat the whole time. I just loved it. The characters were great, fascinating. Anyway, I'll give you my full rundown at the end of the month, but loved it. It has given me a book hangover though. And then the 2 things I did read in physical form, one is When No One Is Watching by Alyssa Cole, which is, I think it's been sold as a gentrification thriller. And I'm gonna tell you guys, I think that people will have better luck with this book if they go into it thinking of it as a horror novel, like kind of much more in the line of Get Out, that movie. I think this works better in terms of the right expectations if you expect something more akin to pacing from a horror novel. I do think it's really well done. I mean, Alyssa Cole is like, she's so great. Her writing is really good. The characters are interesting. You learn a lot about the history of Brooklyn, which I thought was really interesting. And it's a cool setup. Basically, it's this idea of this sort of like historically Black neighborhood is slowly being gentrified by people who increasingly, our main character Sydney wonders like what their deal is, and if they're related to this like pharmatech thing that is moving into an abandoned hospital in the neighborhood called Varentech, I think. So it kind of escalates from there, and it was good. I think the people are gonna have a problem with the pacing in this, is my thing. I gave this 4 stars. I personally really like this because, you know, I'm kind of used to a slow burn just from like reading romance novels, but I think people who are expecting a thriller where it's like very things are happening all the time are not going to be happy with this. Expect a horror, expect slow pacing, expect a lot of character work and introspection and sort of like building up to the main action. So I like this. I don't think this is going to be a book for everyone, but I am excited to see what she does more in this genre. Like I'm excited to see more from her in thrillers basically, because she typically does write romance, and it was very exciting for me to see an author transition successfully from one genre I love them into another. That always makes me really happy. And then the other thing I read in physical form was Sisters in Hate by Seward Darby, and this came out at the end of July. The publisher reached out to me and asked me if I wanted to read it, which I did. Thank you to Little Brown for that. This is a really thought-provoking work of nonfiction, guys. Like, it's basically a case study of 3 women who get radicalized to the alt-right and the different paths they take to do that. So this is a lot about white identity and gender, which is fascinating. And I don't know, it just made me muse, especially just with everything that's been going on this summer in terms of protests and just the never-ending bullshit that is race in America. This definitely was making me think about kind of the intersections of different types of power. And I read an article at some point from Monica Hess talking about that woman, I think her name was Amy Cooper, who called the police on a black man who's bird watching. And she was talking about this idea of women, white women, having a kind of, I forget what she called it, but I'll call it like soft power, where by virtue of the fact of being associated with white men, white women experience some level of at least a feeling of power or a feeling of being connected to power. Like, you know, in My Big Fat Greek Wedding, where they're like, the man is the head of the household, but the woman is the neck, and she can turn the head any way she wants. I think there are a lot of white women, and I would say, I think particularly white women who that system is working for in terms of like, they got the husband, they have the 2.5 kids, you know, they're conventionally attractive. They're like living that dream where that soft power seems more appealing than what equal rights say, which is women don't belong, like basically in small c conservative ideas of gender hierarchies that specifically come out of the 19th century. There's this idea of the woman doesn't have structural or institutional power, but she had, or white women, I should say specifically, don't have structural or institutional power, hard power, but they do have this power of soft power of being on a pedestal and providing this domestic sphere from which men go out and do like battle with the world, and they influence their husbands and like shape them into being better people, and that is where their power lies. I think there's a lot of white women for whom, even if it's not explicitly as it is in this, implicitly that is an attractive idea. And I think that it is a delusion that having that kind of soft power is in any way the same as having actual equality. But it's a very appealing delusion to some women, some white women. And I think that this book just made me think about that and think about why is that kind of flavor of control or power more palatable or appealing to some women than others. And like I said, I think that there are some women for whom that soft power seems to have gotten them a lot of what they want, and therefore they don't have a challenge. I think, you know, frankly, I think being a like smart, bossy, and fat woman, white woman, has made it so that those kinds of soft power are not as palatable to me because they don't get me what I want. Like that's not been my experience or story. So like, I think it's easier for me maybe to see through what that kind of bargain is. But I get why, like, I think that this book made me muse on why it is harder for some white women to see it for what it is. And it's not an excuse, but I think that we can only be effective persuaders, or in some cases effective antagonists, if we understand where people who we disagree with are coming from. Like, I think empathy is powerful, both to build a corps d'esprit among those with whom you agree, but also to understand and like the psychology of people with whom you disagree and like find ways to try to persuade or undermine them. So I think this book did that really effectively. This was blurred by Ibram X. Kendi, which is why I read it in the first place. So like that endorsement tells you anything. And yeah, I thought this was a really well done piece of sort of like journalistic nonfiction about a topic that I haven't seen a lot of, you know, work about. All right, and then in terms of what I'm currently reading, I've got a few things going. So I've got only a couple of chapters left in The Study with the Wrench by Diana Peterfriend, I believe, which is the second in a trilogy of YA mysteries based on the board game Clue. You guys, these are so fun. And this trilogy, I was really, because you just never know in a trilogy, sometimes the second book you're like, oh, this isn't going the way I was hoping it would. And I feel like the second book is actually probably better than the first book, even though the first book has more like directly the trope that I love, which is an isolated closed circle mystery. I thought that this built really effectively on what the first book did. It's still got a lot of intrigue going. It has that sort of like melodrama, like high school melodrama quality to it, which I think is really fun and a smart choice for a book based on a board game property. And I've got like 2 or 3 chapters left. I'm almost done. I should finish that up before I go grocery shopping and write a review. But yeah, it's really fun. And I think for people who like me were kind of saw so much promise in the that series from Maureen Johnson, the Truly Devious series, that one, and felt like it kind of went off the rails and there wasn't enough plot to sustain 3 books. I don't think that's the case for this one. And actually, I would tell you, if you liked the good things in that series but were disappointed, maybe give this one a try, because I think it's getting it has a lot of the same elements in terms of like boarding school and mystery, whatever. I'm happy with it. I'm gonna give it 4 stars probably. So I'm almost done with that one. I'm in the middle of The Great Influenza by John Barry. That's my audio pick right now, which is so good. And probably gonna be my favorite nonfiction book of the year. I mean, it's very relevant to our current moment because it's about the Great Influenza of 1918. And I think what makes it different than what I was expecting and special is that the first third of it really is a kind of talking about the landscape of medical practice in the US and around the world, but like specifically the US. And it is so interesting, so depressing in terms of how similar the problems that they were having then are to the problems we're having right now. Like, it's just like, oh, like people never learn and we don't change. And it's so depressing in some ways. But it's just super interesting. Like I said, very relevant to current events. So I'm sure that adds to the interest. But it is just incredibly well done historical nonfiction. Like, just a pleasure to be a part, like to lose yourself in. It's just super well written, super well done. Really recommend it. So that has been my current audio pick, and my next one, which I already read or like listened to part of it and then I had to go back to the library because just managing my time with it, is Sea of Monsters by Rick Riordan, which is the second in the Percy Jackson series. I think I mentioned this in my July wrap up. I'm just gonna kind of get online for those for audiobooks from the library and slowly make my way through. But it's really charming. Like it's a really fun version of middle grade fantasy. Yeah, it's just a good, like a warm hug of a book kind of a thing. Like it's just pleasant, nice, jolly japes, good times. I think that's most of what I'm currently reading. And then in terms of what I'm gonna read next, so like I mentioned, I do want to really try to get through most of my arcs that I have for, like, not all of them, but like a good chunk of them. So I'm already in October right now reading on arcs, so good job me. My next ones are Simmer Down by Sarah Smith, which is her second book. Her first one was Faker last year, which I enjoyed. And this one I believe is sort of like a work, hate to love or competition kind of thing, which I'm into. I have, let's see, A Golden Fury by Samantha Coho, which is YA fantasy set in ye olde France with alchemy. So I think this will be a good time. I have Crazy Stupid Bromance from Lyssa K. Adams, which I'm so excited. This is gonna be a friends to lovers trope, which I enjoy immensely. So I'm very excited to get to that one. For contemporary romance, The Awakening by Nora Roberts, which is the first in her new trilogy of Paranora, so sort of like romantic urban fantasy kind of things. That comes out in November. And then my most anticipated book of the year is The Burning God by R.F. Kuang, which is the final in the Poppy War trilogy. Very excited for it. So I'm gonna see if I can make time to get to that one this month as well. But I'm sure I'm gonna need some tissues because it's a brutal world, man. And it's a lot to read, but I'm really hopeful that this will be like, stick the landing. And then in terms of some other things that I'm gonna get to, so for my work book club, one of my coworkers picked Scythe by Neale Shusterman, which was so exciting to me. I love it when people pick like more genre picks for book clubs. So the book club is this week. I actually should probably read this weekend, just realized that. So I'm excited. This has been on my TBR for a while. So I'm hopeful that this is gonna be a good YA dystopia kind of thing for me to enjoy. So if you don't know, actually, on the 18th of August, it is the 100th anniversary of women gaining the right to vote here in the US. No, I should say, it wasn't until the civil rights era that like true suffrage for all women and not just white women was achieved. But in theory, on the 18th of August, 1920, women gained the right to vote. It is the 100-year anniversary, and actually the last state to ratify that amendment to make it a part of the US Constitution was Tennessee. So all of this actually happened in my hometown of Nashville before everything that's been going on with COVID. There was gonna be all these celebrations and whatnot. I don't think we're gonna get to have that, but I have been trying to read or like incorporate some celebratory books into that. So first of all, I thought I would read Let Us Dream by Alyssa Cole, which is a book about a Black woman in New York in the 20s who is a like organizer or like trying to get people registered to vote kind of thing. So this seems to be about like a suffragette. So I thought that would be appropriate. And then I have 2 nonfiction books I'm gonna try to read. I have one out from the library right now called Votes for Women, which I believe is like YA, telling the story of women's suffrage. And then there's also an audiobook that I wanna listen to once I get through the 2 that I have right now called The Woman's Hour. And it is specifically, it's kind of sold as almost like nonfiction political intrigue of when Tennessee passed, or like was the last state to ratify the right to vote. So I just thought, again, since it's going to be mostly set here in Nashville, that just seemed like an appropriate one to try to get to this month. Yeah, fun fact, there was a guy who was from Neale, which is outside of where I'm from in McMinn County, for those of you who live here in Tennessee. He was gonna vote against it. Actually, he voted against the ratifying the amendment a couple of times, but he got a letter from his mom who was basically like, be a good boy and give your mom the right to vote. And so at the last minute, he changed his mind and he was the one who broke the tie. So I think that's kind of the story of that. Also an example of that soft power thing. Like, well, you can't rely on it. What if he wasn't a mama's boy and didn't listen to her? There you go. Okay, so those are some of the audio picks that I'm hoping to get to. Oh, and Cast. I got Cast by Isabella Wilkerson. Is that her name? The one who wrote, she's the lady who wrote The Warmth of Other Suns, which is supposed to be amazing, which is also on my TBR at some point. But I bought the audiobook of Cast because I've heard her talking about that recently, really like essentially trying to give new language or like new framing to how race and economics work in class. So I'm gonna try to get to that. I have a challenge going with my friend Bethany at Beautifully Bookish Bethany, where we are picking each other's TBRs. So I may pick a random one of these. I don't know what's in here, but I might get to that. I'm hoping I might get to Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. It's on my classics pick for the year, so I would really like to read it, so maybe I might slot that in. I might listen to Wanderers by Chuck Wendig as a part of Operation Sci-Fi, or I might read The City in the Middle of the Night by Charlie Jane Anders as part of Operation Sci-Fi, but I'm not committing to that. We'll just see kind of how things progress. I'm not really worried about getting back to challenges until next month. What else? I feel like I've got a couple of other things. Oh, I'm in the middle. I've been listening to North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell for the last couple of months, and I'm almost done with it. So I'm hoping I'll finish that. I have been loving it. I can already tell it's going to be one that I'm going to reread. So I've got that going. And yeah, I think that's most of my future reading plans for the rest of the month. We'll see. I've got challenges, but like I've been saying, I am trying to give myself a lot more space just to like have fun and read what I want. And yeah, I think that will do it for this week. That's most of what I'm reading and what I might read next, kind of a thing. I hope you guys have been having a pretty good reading month as well. Let me know anything that you've been enjoying, or if any of the books I mentioned that sound particularly interesting to you. Let me know that in the comments below. Yeah, I think that will do it for now. So if you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, follow me on the social medias if you are so inclined. I have all that information listed in the description box below, along with a link to register to vote and some fun other links of things I've been reading, watching, listening to, etc., including I think I'm gonna link to a really great video I just watched from Ashley at Bookish Realm about nostalgia in the context of rereading the Twilight series. I just thought it was a really impactful review. Also, I'll link to the live stream discussion. That was fun too, that Bethany hosted. But yeah, I just thought that was a great discussion. So anyway, I'll leave links of things that I've been interested in recently down there, along with that link to register to vote. Since it is the week commemorating the 100th anniversary of women getting the right to vote, wouldn't this be a fantastic week for you to register to vote if you have not? We are 80 days, I believe, from the federal elections here in the US. Let's just do this. I think that will do it though for me for now. Thus endeth the rant. I hope you guys are having an absolutely lovely day today, and I will just talk to you soon. Bye.